A belligerent drunk interrupted Elvis's concert, yelling insults and demanding he prove he's a real man. Instead of having security remove him, Elvis did something that left the entire arena speechless. It was November 14, 1976 at the Las Vegas Hilton, and Elvis was in the middle of one of his most energetic performances of the year. The crowd of 20,000 was eating up every second of his set, and Elvis was feeding off their energy like electricity. He'd just finished an explosive version of Burning Love and was transitioning into Hound Dog when something happened that nobody in that arena would ever forget. From somewhere in the middle section, a loud slurred voice cut through the music and the crowd noise like a knife through silk. "Elvis, you ain't nothing but a fake." The voice belonged to Bobby Big Mike Henderson, a 35-year-old construction worker from Phoenix who'd been drinking heavily at the hotel bar since noon. Big Mike was what you'd call a professional troublemaker. The kind of guy who picked fights at sporting events and thought famous people needed to be taken down a peg. He'd bought a ticket to Elvis's show, not because he was a fan, but because he wanted to prove some twisted point about celebrities being soft and fake. In his alcohol-clouded mind, he'd convinced himself that Elvis Presley was nothing more than a pretty boy who'd never faced a real challenge. "You hear me, Presley? You're a phony." Elvis stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, gradually stopped playing. 20,000 people turned to look at this drunk man standing in his seat, swaying slightly, pointing aggressively at the stage. Elvis's first reaction was what you'd expect from any professional performer. He tried to handle it with humor and redirect the energy back to the show. "Well, hello there, friend," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice carrying that familiar southern charm. "Looks like we got ourselves a music critic in the house tonight." The audience laughed, expecting this to diffuse the situation. Most hecklers, when acknowledged by the performer, either sit down embarrassed or get escorted out by security. But Big Mike wasn't most hecklers. "Don't you friend me, boy," Mike shouted back, his voice carrying clearly through the arena. "I'm talking to you. You think you're so tough with your fancy clothes and your singing? Why don't you come down here and prove you're a real man?" The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. This wasn't just drunken nonsense anymore. This was a direct challenge, and everyone could feel the tension ratcheting up. Elvis stood at the microphone for a moment, studying this drunk man, who was now causing other audience members to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Security guards were starting to move toward Mike's section, but Elvis held up a hand to stop them. "Sir," Elvis said, his voice still calm, but with a slight edge, "you paid good money to be here tonight, just like everyone else. How about we all just enjoy the music?" "I don't want to enjoy your music," Mike yelled back. "I want to see if you're anything more than a mama's boy who shakes his hips for teenage girls." That last comment hit Elvis in a way that was visible to everyone in the arena. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, the famous Elvis smile disappeared completely. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were booing Mike. Others were shouting for security to remove him. The energy that had been joyful and celebratory was now tense and ugly. What happened next surprised everyone, including Elvis's own band and crew. Instead of signaling for security to remove the heckler, instead of trying to ignore him and continue with the show, Elvis set down his microphone and started walking toward the edge of the stage. "You want to know if I'm a real man?" Elvis said, his voice now carrying clearly through the arena sound system. "You think I'm just some pretty boy who can't handle himself?" The arena went dead silent. 20,000 people held their breath, unsure of what they were about to witness. Elvis looked directly at Big Mike and said, "Well, friend, I tell you what, why don't you come up here and we'll settle this like gentlemen?" The audience erupted. Some people were cheering, others were shouting, "Don't do it, Elvis." Security guards were frantically trying to figure out what to do. Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, was reportedly having a heart attack in the wings, but Elvis wasn't done. "Come on up here," Elvis repeated, gesturing toward the stage. "You want to prove something? Let's prove it. But I'll tell you what, we are not going to fight like animals. We are going to settle this the way real men settle things." Big Mike, emboldened by the alcohol and the attention, started pushing his way toward the stage. "Damn right we are," he shouted. Security tried to intercept him, but Elvis waved them off. "Let him come," Elvis said. "Let him come up here." When Big Mike finally made it to the stage, stumbling slightly as he climbed up, the entire arena was in chaos. People were on their feet, some screaming, some trying to get closer to see what was going to happen. Elvis walked over to where Mike was standing, and for a moment, the two men faced each other. Elvis in his iconic white jumpsuit, calm and controlled, and Big Mike, sweaty and swaying, clearly intoxicated, but still aggressive. "All right, friend," Elvis said, close enough now that his voice carried through the microphone clipped to his jumpsuit. "You want to prove who's the real man here? I got a proposition for you." "Bring it on," Mike slurred. "Here's what we are going to do," Elvis said, his voice suddenly taking on that smooth, confident tone that had charmed millions. "We are going to have ourselves a singing contest. You and me, right here, right now. Winner takes all." The suggestion was so unexpected, so completely different from what anyone thought was going to happen that it took a moment for the crowd to process it. A singing contest. This drunk heckler versus Elvis Presley in a singing contest. Then someone in the audience started laughing. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire arena was filled with laughter and applause. The tension that had been building toward violence suddenly transformed into anticipation for something completely different. Big Mike, however, was not amused. "I don't want to sing with you. I want to fight you." "Well, that's too bad," Elvis said, grinning now because this is my stage. "These are my people, and we do things my way here. You want to prove you're tougher than me? Then prove you can do what I do. Sing." Elvis gestured to Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and guitarist, who was watching this entire scene with his mouth hanging open. "Charlie, give the man a microphone," Elvis said. "And boys," he called to his band, "let's give our new friend here a chance to show us what he's got." The band, still in shock, but following Elvis's lead, prepared to play. Big Mike handed a microphone, and suddenly the center of attention in a way he hadn't expected looked around the arena with a mixture of confusion and panic. What do you want me to sing?" he asked, his aggressive tone now replaced with uncertainty. "Whatever you want, friend." Elvis said magnanimously, "This is your moment. 20,000 people are waiting to hear what you've got to say." What followed was both hilarious and oddly touching. Big Mike, clearly out of his element, but trapped by his own bravado, attempted to sing My Way, apparently the only song he could think of in his alcohol-fogged brain. His performance was predictably terrible. He was off-key, forgot half the words, and swayed so much that Charlie Hodge had to steady him to keep him from falling over. But here's the remarkable part. Instead of the audience booing or laughing at him, something else happened. As Mike struggled through the song, clearly embarrassed and vulnerable, the crowd began to cheer him on. "You got this. Keep going. Sing it, Mike." Elvis, standing beside him, began clapping along and encouraging him. When Mike forgot the words, Elvis would whisper them to him. When he started to give up, Elvis put his arm around his shoulders and kept him going. By the time Big Mike finished his stumbling version of My Way, something had changed in the room. This angry, belligerent drunk who had come to cause trouble had become, for a few minutes, just another person trying his best at something difficult. The audience gave him a standing ovation, not because he sang well, but because he tried, and because Elvis had created a space where even a hostile heckler could be transformed into someone worth cheering for. "That was beautiful, Mike," Elvis said, genuinely seeming to mean it. "That took real courage." Big Mike, now clearly emotional and no longer aggressive, looked around the arena in wonder. "I can't believe they're clapping for me." "Of course they are," Elvis said. "You just did something brave. You got up here and tried something new in front of 20,000 people. That's more than most folks ever do." "Now," Elvis said, grinning at the crowd, "I suppose it's my turn." But instead of showing off with one of his big hits, instead of demonstrating the vast difference in talent between himself and the heckler, Elvis did something that showed his true character. He sang He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, a simple gospel song that invited audience participation. And he made sure that Big Mike sang along with him, giving him harmony parts and making him feel like a true part of the performance. The two men stood on stage together, the king of rock and roll and a drunk construction worker from Phoenix singing gospel music while 20,000 people joined in. When the song ended, Elvis turned to Big Mike with genuine warmth. "Mike, I want to ask you something," Elvis said. "What made you so angry tonight? What's really bothering you?" The question asked with such sincere concern seemed to break something open in Big Mike. In front of 20,000 people, this tough construction worker started to cry. "I lost my job last month," Mike said into the microphone, his voice shaking. "My wife left me. I wanted someone to pay attention to me. I wanted to matter. The arena went completely silent. Elvis put his arm around Mike's shoulders. Brother, you matter. You matter to me, and you matter to every person in this room. We all have times when we feel lost and angry. But you don't have to tear other people down to build yourself up. What Elvis did next became the stuff of Vegas legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis said to the audience, I want to tell you about the real courage I've seen tonight. It wasn't Mike coming up here to cause trouble. It was Mike admitting when he was hurting and asking for help. That takes more guts than any fight ever could. Elvis then announced that he was personally going to help Mike find a job in Las Vegas, and that if anyone in the audience owned a construction company and needed a hard worker, they should talk to his people after the show because that's what we do for each other. Elvis said, We help, we don't tear down, we build up. Big Mike stayed for the rest of the concert, sitting on the side of the stage, occasionally joining in on songs when Elvis invited him. By the end of the night, he had gone from being the show's biggest disruption to being part of its most memorable moments. 3 construction company owners approached Elvis's management after the show with job offers for Mike. He chose one, moved to Las Vegas, and worked there for the next 15 years until his retirement. But more importantly, the story of what happened that night spread throughout Las Vegas and beyond. It became a legendary example of how to handle conflict with grace, wisdom, and compassion. Other performers began talking about Elvis's handling of the heckler situation. Instead of using security or legal measures to deal with disruptive audience members, some started trying to find creative ways to turn negative energy into positive experiences. Elvis showed us that every heckler is just a human being having a bad day, said comedian Don Rickles, who was known for his own combative style with audiences. He turned an enemy into a friend in front of 20,000 people. That's not just good showmanship, that's good humanity. For Elvis, the incident was meaningful because it reinforced his belief that his role as a performer was about more than just entertainment. I realized that night that I have a responsibility, Elvis told Joe Esposito afterward. When someone comes to my show, whether they're a fan or a heckler, I have an opportunity to make their life a little better. That's not something I take lightly. Elvis began incorporating more direct audience interaction into his shows, always looking for opportunities to connect with people who seemed to be struggling or upset. The entire incident was captured on bootleg recordings that have become some of the most treasured Elvis audio documents among collectors. But it's not just the music that people value. It's Elvis's handling of the confrontation, his wisdom, and his compassion. You can hear Elvis thinking in real time, said Elvis historian Jerry Osborne. You can hear him deciding to choose love over conflict, understanding over judgment. It's a masterclass in human decency. The story of Elvis and Big Mike Henderson became a parable about how to handle conflict in any situation, until they become your friends. Today, the story of Elvis and the heckler is taught in conflict resolution courses and cited by therapists as an example of how to de-escalate tense situations through empathy and understanding. Big Mike Henderson, before his death in 2003, gave several interviews about that night. In each one, he credited Elvis with saving his life by showing him that there were better ways to deal with pain than lashing out at others. Elvis could have humiliated me in front of all those people, Mike said in his final interview. Instead, he helped me find my dignity. He turned the worst night of my life into the beginning of a better life. The confrontation between Elvis and Big Mike Henderson reminds us that behind every act of aggression is usually a person in pain. And it shows us that the strongest response to hostility isn't more hostility. It's understanding, compassion, and the willingness to see the humanity in everyone. Elvis could have had Mike thrown out, could have made jokes at his expense, could have used his power and position to humiliate him. Instead, he chose to help him, to heal him, and to show 20,000 people what real strength looks like. That's why nearly 50 years later, people still talk about the night Elvis turned a heckler into a friend. It wasn't just great entertainment. It was great humanity. And in a world that often seems divided by anger and misunderstanding, maybe that's exactly the kind of story we need to hear. If this incredible story of turning conflict into compassion moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of choosing understanding over anger. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness changed your perspective completely? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments that reveal the best of human nature.